Alright, so we got our shape morph working. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple extra little flourishes to this. What we'll do is we'll have like a little spiral grow out from him while he's kind of popping up from this puddle. Now to add a spiral in, we have the option of either adding it as a new layer or adding it to an existing layer. And there's also, within your shape layers, there's also groups. I don't want to go too far into detail because it tends to get a little bit overwhelming when you first come in to the program, but basically there's a layer structure within your shape groups that doesn't exist within other layers in After Effects. So if you want to have objects be able to move in complicated ways on their own with arcs and such, you would have to make each one of those shapes into its own layer. If you kind of want to handle them all as a single object, for the most part, and be able to have like small animations on their own, then it would be more advantageous to have them in the same layer. And if you want them to take on the same colors and same properties like fill color, stroke width, then you would even want to put them in the same group. So for the flourishes that we're going to make, we'll have them move with the layer. And we'll kind of group them all into this puddle layer. So to do that, what you want to do first is you want to make sure that the layer is selected, which is our puddle outlines layer. Then we're going to take our pen tool and we'll just kind of draw out what our flourishes look like. And I'm going to do it based on where this ends up at. So with my pen tool, I'm just going to kind of rough out a spiral. I don't really like the way that's looking. Let me do point by point, and then I'll add my handles in afterwards. This is actually a way that I recommend working with vectors anyway. Starting out with a very geometric look without any handles on it, and then adding in the handles afterwards. If you try to draw the handles while you're drawing it out, it tends to not work as well because it's a little hard to predict how they're going to work. But if you rough it out first, you can get a general idea of what it's going to look like, and then you can start adding in handles, and that adds a little bit more control to it. So just something simple like this, like a little flourish, will work. Now what we want is we want the fill color to be the stroke color, and we want our fill to not be there. So I'm going to select my stroke color first, and I'll grab my eyedropper tool, and I'll select the fill color here. Then I'm going to go to my fill color. Actually, we'll set our fill setting. So there's two different ways that we can change this to being a different type of fill. One is clicking on the word fill, and then you have the ability to switch between no fill, solid color, linear gradient, and radial gradient. You can also mess with your blend modes and opacity specific to the fill, aside from the rest of the layer. The better way to do this is if you hold down the Alt key, also known as the Option key, you can click on the fill color, and that'll actually let you cycle through them. So if you have a solid color, you click 3 times, it's going to switch it to being no color. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to bend this out a little bit. So I still got my pen tool. I'm holding down my Option key, Alt key on PCs or Windows computers. And then I'm going to just drag out some handles, add some flourishes. Jeez. This scroll zoom is really tough to work with sometimes with the Magic Mouse. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Make a couple extra adjustments, smooth these handles out a little bit more. Alright, that'll work. That'll be good enough. Now, if you want to make some extra adjustments to our stroke here, we can do that from down in the layer. We'll see that if we go to our shape layer, we have contents shape 1, path, and that's going to be, shape 1 is going to be our stroke. Let me go ahead and expand the whole thing. Contents, we have shape 1 and group 1. So group 1 right now is our puddle ghost, and I'm going to go ahead and rename that. If you ever need to rename a layer, you can click on it, hit return, and then type the new name. We'll call it puddle ghost. And this one is going to be spiral, since it's sort of a spiral. So in my spiral, I can see my stroke option. If it's not expanded, make sure you expand it. And then we can still change the color down here. We can change the opacity. We can change the width of it. I kind of like 14 for my width. But what I do want to change on this is right now it's got a butt cap, which gives it like very straight edge on the end. And instead, I want to do a round cap. That'll just kind of round it out a little bit better, and it fits better with the style that way. And you can also do things like add dashes if you'd like. But for now, just round out the cap. Now what we need to do is we are going to apply something called trim paths on this. And trim paths allows you to wipe along a path. If you do this with a fill, it'll actually kind of join the fill to the two edges of the stroke. Sort of like when you're drawing a shape within Illustrator and it hasn't quite finished yet. Which could be an interesting look, but it's a little hard to get it to work right. And it looks really rough if you don't do it the right way. The better way to work with this is actually to just do it with a stroke and then allow it to wipe along the stroke. So it's sort of like you're masking along a stroke. So we're going to do it that way. We want to make sure that we only apply this to our spiral. So select your spiral group. Go to this add menu right here. And down in this section is going to be where your different effects are. And these effects can only be applied to shape layers. They're very specific and they work with the shape data. So towards the middle of this, you'll see trim paths. It's one of the best effects and easiest to use. I don't know if that's showing up in the video, but my mouse keeps breaking. I'll just have to switch to my Wacom tablet for right now. All right, so you want to apply the trim paths, and it should apply within the group, so you shouldn't see it outside of the group. And that lets you know that it's only going to affect this group. Now what trim paths does, like I was saying, it allows you to wipe off and on the path. So if we decrease our end point, you'll see that it wipes from the last point to the start. If you increase your start, it'll wipe from the beginning towards the end. So we want this to draw on the effect, and then we'll have it kind of wipe itself off as well. Now it helps if we tie this to our motion on our ghost. And I know that starts at 10, but it actually starts moving up around 13 if that's where you put that second keyframe. So I'm going to put my play at 13, and I'm going to lower my end to be 0. And I'll click a keyframe stopwatch for N to tell it to start animating at that point. Now I could go and scroll down and see where all these keyframes are and line everything up that way, but it's tough because you got to constantly scroll up and down. There's a hotkey that you can use to show you just your keyframe properties, and it's the letter U as in under on your keyboard. And that's why I made sure to place this keyframe before I pressed it. That way both of these show up, and that's the only thing that shows up, and it's a lot easier to line up this way. So I want it to start. Had it at 13, but now that I'm seeing how it crosses over, I'm actually going to have it start at around 16, I think. And that way it'll come behind it. And then we'll increase the end to 100% by about 21 or 22. Oh, it's actually, well, once we put an ease on it, it should line up a little bit better. So try to get it so it follows the ghost so we don't get much overlap from the ghost and the swirl, spiral. And we don't want to leave it on in the end. We want it to actually wipe itself off as well. So we're going to have to go back into our layer, find our trim paths again, and before it finishes animating the end, we want to have the start to wipe off. So I'm going to enable keyframes on start. It's about 2 frames before the last keyframe and end. And I'm going to go to the last keyframe. Let me hit U again. You can see that now that my start has keyframes on it, it starts showing up. I'm going to go to my last keyframe on my puddle ghost, our path position, and I'll increase the start. Okay. So we get this kind of swirl. Oh, start all the way to 100. There we go. So without any easing, it's going to look sort of like that. Now what I want to do is I want to add some easing in. I'm going to ease both these keyframes. I'll select them both. Right click, keyframe assistant, and we'll ease out. And now we can see with the ease out, it doesn't actually collide with the ghost. And let's go ahead and ease in the other ones as well. All right, pretty good. Okay, so in this lesson we looked at how trim paths works. We used it on a stroke, which is the best way to work with trim paths. And the next lesson we're going to look at how to make a duplicate of this on the other side.